evening is the lovely Carson Beker. And I'm so glad that she was able, sorry, everyone was ready to clap. I'm so glad that she's able to make it this evening. Let me read Carson's bio here and then you can all clap. Carson Beker is co-founder of Wayward Writers and has taught creative writing at SFSU. Her writing has appeared in Gigantic Sequins, Transfer, and Bourbon Pen. She has performed at Quiet Lightning, Red Light Lit, and Lit Crawl. Her play, Sunflower Suicide Moon, won a second-place Highsmith Award for a play on LGBTQ themes and will be given a stage production at Z-Space in May. Her play, Brizo, will be part of the 2015 SF Olympians Festival. She is currently at work on a fantasy romance novel about grief camp and seeking out true love. This is her last semester at SFSU, and she is already writing bad, sad poetry. Everyone welcome Carson Beker!
All right, number one, get cake. It's amazing cake. This is the best cake I've ever had.
It's real good.
This is really good cake. Brief survey. How many of you have ever been told to calm down? How many of you have ever been told to cheer up? All right, this one's for you. This is named, so I wrote it on the bus on the way over here. Giovanna's personal time vacation. In the month between her mother's death and her own suicide, Giovanna went on vacation to the south of France. You've had a shock, they said. Go away, get some air. Provence is nice, you should go there. So Giovanna cashed in her vacation time and her savings for one round-trip ticket to Marseille. Her airplane tilted dangerously, the Mediterranean on one side and the sun on the other. Have a breather, they said, as if she had never breathed before. The man in the aisle reached over her seat to close her window, his sleeve brushing her breasts. Take some personal time. The shock of landing upended her purse and sent makeup, tampons, coins, chewing gum wrappers, and used Kleenex in every direction. Giovanna knelt to pick up her coins. Men in black suits frowned and nudged her with their pant legs. Enjoy yourself. The wheels of Giovanna's new suitcase stuck in the cobblestones of the old city. Women in translucent white dresses floated past. Live a little. She would have wanted you to. Giovanna's hotel room had a framed picture of lavender, a rusty bathtub, an open window so high she could not reach it, and a bed hard as a gravestone. When she dropped her suitcase on the bedspread, the dust of ages lifted up and floated back down. Live! Go to Aix-en-Provence, they said. The cathedral has 2 Gothic naves. So the next morning, a Monday, Giovanna sweated out last night's bottle of rosé over a 2-hour bus ride. But in Aix-en-Provence, she found only Robert. Her ex-husband was lounging on the stone steps of the 2-nave cathedral, smoking a cigarette. He looked so spider-like in his tight jeans that she thought maybe that's what he was, a spider, what he'd been the whole time. She thought of him sprawled out, skinny-legged in the white towel of her shower, and then crawling up her thighs, blinking at her through architectural glasses. If he was a spider, she might be able to forgive him. Robert, she said, naming him, as if to staple him in place. She thought of asking him what he was doing there in the south of France. Giovanna, he said, as if he hadn't disappeared from a place he was supposed to be, e.g., their marriage, and reappeared in the place he didn't belong, e.g., her personal time vacation. Are you one of the knaves? She asked. His mirrored sunglass smile shone through her. Are you one of the gargoyles? He said. In a way that made her conscious of her posture, she straightened and looked up. The cathedral was Gothic, looking less built than scribbled by somebody trying to get their pen to work. Buttresses everywhere cut up the sky. There was, indeed, a gargoyle missing. They had lunch. They sat in a restaurant that seemed lively from the outside but was empty. A waiter with a grave face and a missing hand brought them menus and stared them down. His other hand was long and maggot-fingered. My mother died, Giovanna announced over her menu. How are you? Robert talked about work. We're on the breaking point of something big, he said. He picked up his napkin and threw it back down. Robert was always on the breaking point of something big. The waiter materialized and set before them 2 large empty white plates. "Is there going to be food?" Giovanna wanted her voice to sound cold and devastating. It squeaked. The fish, when it came, was full of bones. Giovanna had met Robert in a restaurant after work. She was eating alone, avoiding the dusty mirrors and disappointments. A disappointment she had seen reflected on so many blind dates. The men arriving to find that although she was an Italian woman, she wasn't that kind of Italian woman. She wasn't lithe, flat-haired, Prosecco bubbles and Vespas. She was thick-ankled, frizzy-haired, and had the gift of making everything she wore look wrinkled. Her eyes were a little bit too wild. Her nose was in the way. She often spilled her drink trying to check her watch. But on that summer night, when Giovanna looked up from her report, Robert was there. Handsome, graying hair receding just enough, ironed. He introduced himself and took one of her French fries. Later, she wondered if he'd just been very hungry. Robert took Giovanna to places she had only seen from the bus: the theater, the opera, walking under the moonlight around the lake. On the bridge, he'd lifted her up to the railing as if she were thin. She felt the wind, the long drop to the water, his hips pushing into her until she had no choice but to let go, tipping into his hands. Giovanna called her mother. Over the telephone, she heard her childhood home: the crack of the old leather, the rustle of the flowered wallpaper, the wooden clock ticking on the mantel, and the wolf shutters swinging. She heard her mother reach into her breast pocket to fish out her divining pendulum. The slink of chain. She imagined but could not see the pendulum swinging around, emphatically, in the wrong direction. Her mother said, "Giovanna, come home." "You can't tell me what to do," she said, her own words starting her head up, and she caught herself in the mirror, and for the first time she saw that her eyes were as green as razor leaves, and that her lips were boyish and playful. She married Robert. Shortly after, he skidded away, the way he was doing now, legs tapping impatiently at the restaurant floor. "Well, Giovanna," he extended a hand. She took it. His palm tingled webbily. "Goodbye, Robert," she said to the empty restaurant when the check arrived. She thought of the missing gargoyle. She imagined it tipping over one morning, maybe after a storm, and plunging, ugly face screaming at the imminent ground. "You'll love the fishermen," they said. So on Tuesday, Giovanna woke at dawn to watch the fishermen sail into port. She was disappointed but not surprised to find that every fisherman wore the face of her mother. It was too familiar. Brown eyes, tight brown curls, frown underlined 3 times. All this on every fisherman. Above jean jackets, over parkas, under a red Cousteau hat. The fishermen, or rather, fisher mothers, emerged from the orange sunrise, fishless, but with armfuls of octopus. These they dumped on the port, on the pavement right there, each boat with its own tentacled pile. Giovanna made herself look at them. They were gray, brine-smelling, and when she came near, every tentacle reached out as if to say, "Giovanna, come home." "But did you touch them?" they would ask. Giovanna leaned in and reached out. A tentacle curled around her ring finger. It wasn't slimy, but soft. Its suckers were glistening. "Eh!" She leapt back. The man behind her was rocking his boat with one foot. He did not have the face of her mother. He had round, tan shoulders. His lips were full and twisted. He was small and hairy. Giovanna liked small, hairy men. They were accessible. She smiled back at him crookedly. The man handed her a plastic bag. 10 euros, he said, as if she were going to steal the octopus. Or buy it? Take this octopus back to her hotel? And what? Put it in the bathtub? Or tie one tentacle around her neck, swing the other over the light fixture, and jump off the bed? Well, it might stretch, but it would hold. When her mother was alive, Giovanna imagined her disappearing. Her eyes would catch on wooden containers, boxes, cupboards, drawers, and she would imagine she could fit her mother inside, just for a day. Now she walked back to the hotel, holding a bag with an octopus in it, away from her hips. The bag sweated, octopus blood, octopus spit, ocean water. Her thighs rubbed together, and she was lost in the winding yellow streets, and the plastic cut her fingers. She came upon a square with an open well. It was so deep she could not see the bottom, only smell the cool of stone and moss. She looked over one shoulder, the other. The square was empty. She dangled the octopus bag over the abyss. No one. She dropped her wrist and let it slide. Splotch. Go to the market, they said. Well, the problem with the market was that it was too full of babies. That's what the olives looked like to Giovanna, screaming, oily baby faces. For €3, you could buy a pound, and if you got close enough, the saleswoman would pop one into your mouth. And Giovanna was terrified that the woman would pop an olive into her mouth. Another stall was piled with silver fish. This is how you clean a fish, Giovanna, with your thumb, her mother had said. Once there had been a silver fish in the kitchen. Giovanna was 8. The silver fish had scales like wishes. Go on with your thumb. So she did. In the bowl, the silver scales dimmed. From wish to gray, they died. Put them back, Giovanna had cried. You took them off. You can't put them back. Learn, Giovanna. This is how you clean a chicken. This is how you chop an onion. This is how you cry. This is how. Learn, Giovanna. Why can't you cry? That night in the hotel, the shutters of her too-high window opened, closed, opened, closed. She could not reach them. Every year, Giovanna's mother had left for a month in summer, a pilgrimage. There is food, Giovanna. Stay inside. Remember the wolves. When she was 12, Giovanna hid in the dark. Too hot for light, too scared of the wolves to leave. When she was 13, she opened the shutters, looked out into the street, and saw no wolves. When she was 15, Giovanna flung open the door and ran down the stairs away. Now the wolves were outside at the door, howling in the wind. Open, closed, open, closed. Come home, Giovanna. Open, closed. Why don't you cry? Open, closed. I need you, Giovanna. I am sick. Enough, she yelled. On Thursday, Giovanna went looking for her mother. Every street had a church, and every church had a Madonna, pink or blue or black. Every pedestal was carved with Madre de Dio, but to Giovanna it looked like matricide. You killed me, Giovanna. She found the right church. Like her mother, it was made of stone and pointed at the sky. She climbed the stairs. On your knees, Giovanna. Open, closed, howling wolves. She climbed the stairs on her knees. The stone scraped, people stared. Inside, stained glass incense spiraled. The smell of wood, the smell of stone, the smell of blood. On the marble, under her knees, Giovanna felt water. Learn, Giovanna, every church is built on a river. She looked for her mother in the pews. There were only 3 old men, piled against one another, asleep. She looked for her mother in the font. It was dry. She expected her mother behind the altar, in the reliquary. Not the whole mother, just a hand. Red nails, a red cut-off wrist, long fingers clutching the pendulum in a tight fist. Maybe on a turquoise cushion, but there was only a gold box for coins. She dropped a coin, nothing happened. She put more coins and bought candles, arranged them on a row on a stone floor. She lit them one after the other. What do you want, Giovanna? Well, what did she want? Behind her lids, Giovanna made the pendulum swing backwards. There would be tomato soup on the stove, her mother's hand on her wet face. In this version, her mother would have brought her to the kitchen, sat her down before the bowl with the dead fish scales. She would have made a paste of flour and water, stirring with a fork. Learn, Giovanna. Together they would have picked up each of the scales from the bowl. Each scale they would dip into the paste and put back on the fish. When the work was done, her mother would take Giovanna's hand and put it over the fish, and Giovanna would feel the scales come to silver life under her hand, sharp as a grater, electric. Her mother would have opened the door for Giovanna herself. Hurry, Giovanna! And outside the apartment, instead of a dark hallway, there would be sun, sand trespassing onto the brown tile, pining into the door jamb. Run, and Giovanna would have run, fish flapping into in her hand, to the wolfless sea. Giovanna looked into the candles. She thought of her mother's hand on her forehead. Giovanna, you're not feeling good today. She thought of her mother's smile. Giovanna, dessert. She was on the stone, surrounded by candles, darkness, light, open, closed. Now, Giovanna said. Now, 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 now. She waited. Nothing came. On Friday, there was a knock on her hotel room door. "Hello," said the short, hairy fisherman from the octopus port. He stood in the doorway looking at her. Giovanna was stricken with guilt. The octopus, the well. "I do not have your," she said, blushing, but she did not know how to say octopus in French. "I do not have the thing," she said, undulating. He stood up, walked past her, looked at the bed. He smiled. Giovanna remembered the way he jumped from boat to port, the way he wound the barnacled rope around the mooring post. She smiled. She tried to look like a mooring post. The fisherman wound and round and wound himself around her. Once in the night she woke. The fisherman slept face down, hairy arms near. "But did you touch him?" they would ask. So Giovanna reached out and touched his hairy arm. It was sleek with ocean salt and warm. When Giovanna woke again, noon light in her eyes, a thin white sheet wound around her body. A thin white sheet wound around her body. She pulled the sheet off. She opened her eyes. The bed was empty. The sheets were bunched. Giovanna patted them down hard. She threw the pillows on the ground. She looked under the bed. She looked behind the headboard. She ripped the sheets off, the mattress cover off, the mattress off, down to the box spring, down to the skeleton, and she searched the sheets again, and there was no small hairy fisherman. Not in her suitcase, not in the bathroom, not in her purse. She was alone. "Now you cry?" Giovanna watched herself cry in the bathroom mirror. Her nose was still in the way. "What did you learn, Giovanna?" she asked herself in a familiar voice. The outer edges of her skin, untouched, ballooned and expanded far away from her. Alone, and still that voice. "What did you learn, Giovanna?" She reached for a sheet, wrapped it tight around her fist. She looked in the mirror, drew her fist back. "What did you learn?" She hit. The mirror broke, glittering pieces, razor sharp. She picked up two of the strongest pieces and set them on the edge of the rusty bathtub. They zinged sharp. She hesitated. She looked in her purse, pulled out her wallet. Identification. Then she saw that her cash was gone, a thin smear of salt around the clasp. She smiled, relieved. So he had been there after all, her fisherman. She found another thin smear of salt near her door. "I will go out in the sun," she said. So she went to an outdoor cafe. She ordered a bottle of rosé. As an afterthought, she ordered octopus. She did not eat, only skewered. Across the square, the men played a game, bocce, pétanque, white shirts crawling up round bellies. There was a woman there too. Her hair was wild, draped in a red cloth. She smoked a pipe. Her skirts were yellow, green, and red, layered. She had dark eyebrows and hairs coming from her chin. She looked back at Giovanna. She moved her pipe to the side of her red mouth and exhaled smoke. The woman picked up a shining ball, swung her skirts to the side, aimed, leaned, and threw, a single motion too perfect. Her ball, carrying the silver sun, hit the dust and rolled. It struck another, displacing it. The balls clanged. Behind Giovanna, the church bells clanged. The men raised their arms and swore. The woman's shadow was so tall, it stung Giovanna's eyes. Giovanna ordered another bottle of wine. The afternoon widened into whispering cicadas and dust and eucalyptus. A wind brought the sea. It was the last day of her personal time vacation, and Giovanna was drunk. The hotel bathroom had been cleaned. The mirror was gone. "You are late, Giovanna." Tomorrow she would go back to her empty apartment, to the black telephone with her mother's voice still in it, and to the package unwrapped on her nighting table. The package contained her mother's pendulum, red nail polish, and a scrap of matted gray fur, blood brown at the tip, wolf-like. Giovanna looked at the window, too high. She pulled the bed over to the window wall. It squealed over the floor, scraping linoleum. Giovanna stepped onto the bed. She reached for the window, still too high. She could see the shutters threatening to open-close. Giovanna jumped on her bed. She jumped, bed spring squeaking, frizzy hair flying up and down, She bounced, her skirt lifting up and around her hips. She jumped again. 1, 2, 3. She grabbed the window ledge. She pulled herself up by wobbly arms, hoisting herself up and over the window, hanging half in, half out the room. Half in the room, half out over the rooftops. She pushed the shutters fully open. The wooden frame, brown and thick, worn by salt air, dug into her spreading stomach. The frittering clay of the window ledge smelled like rivers, like moisture. Tiny specks ran from her fingers, disappeared into the wind. Below, winding streets lit pink and orange by the setting sun. Below, cicadas, the smell of anise, a guitar. Giovanna leaned into sage, eucalyptus, frying fish. Below, the sea, dark-watered, was roiling with life, with waves, with seagulls, with tentacles, plastic bags, flying fish, swimmers, fishing boats, tourist boats, sailboats, crashing waves, Coke bottles, rocks, starfish, seaweed, jellyfish, dolphins. It roiled as if there was so much below the surface the water could not keep it down. It would give up its treasures. And everything moved, and everything pulled at the moon, and all the rest of the creatures reached upward, demanding to live.